Here we now streaming on YouTube. Well, welcome to another episode of the Operation Grow Show, Season 3, the Orange Gasm season, I guess. I think that's what we could call it. Orange Gasm and Autopot being the the interesting season to get started with. Hang on, let me turn off that. I'll tell you what, without further ado then, we'll have a quick round of introductions and then we'll go over who the sponsors are for the show and we'll carry on from there. So let's start with Lefty. How are you doing, sir?
I'm good, guys. How are you this week? Looking forward to another fun conversation this week, and everybody's plans are going, so be a fun week to get going with the show.
Yeah, that's so definitely good to see everybody's seeds are popping and get some progress update on that side of things. Let's jump over to Tyler. How are you doing, sir?
Doing well. Hope everyone's doing okay, staying safe during COVID. Looking forward to this season.
Yeah, looks like a little chilly there with the beanie on still.
A little bit.
And so over to you, Underground. How are you doing, sir?
Doing pretty good, man. Out here trying to get the grow growing, having fun.
Yeah, it looks like a nice day there.
Beautiful out here today, man. It's beautiful out.
Fantastic. Oh, very nice. Very nice indeed. Could certainly do with some more of that over here. And finally over to you, Dr. Wiggler.
What up? I'm high. I'm here. What's up?
The way to be on a Saturday. And cool, then over to first one of the sponsors of the show, Russ Jeff from RE Genetics, who's sponsoring us on the Genetics this season.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for having me.
And how you doing, sir?
Dude, I'm good. I'm good and stoned. It's a nice, beautiful day here. I just got done watering a small tent, so it's I'm off to a rocking start.
Fantastic. That sounds like fun. It's evening here. I'm on a nice bit of tequila. Can't complain.
Cheers.
Cheers to you, sir. And over to Ben from Plantation, who's also representing one of our other sponsors, Autopot, on the show.
Hi. How's everyone doing? All good?
Yeah.
Excellent.
And earlier on, we were all commenting on your rather impressive greenhouse picture behind there.
Thank you.
And I can validate that is a legit picture.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no Photoshop involved.
No, none whatsoever. So this week, the grow is starting to get underway. I think everybody's seeds have popped. And we've got the initial growth on the go. I know, Tyler, you had a couple of seeds that were struggling to shed the shell.
Yep.
And again, there, what we mentioned was the tip, hit it with a mister to keep the shell moist so that it doesn't dry out and become too hard. Or as you were saying, with the little domes that you've got, stick one of those domes over each one with the lid closed so the humidity stays up nice and high inside there, and that will help make sure that it can push it off
Knock
by
it off.
itself.
Yep.
Yeah. Don't go at it with the tweezers.
No,
Don't do that.
Not unless you've got more seeds and want to keep trying. And then I think something else that was been interesting is noticing the rate of germination and initial growth.
Yeah.
Given everybody's techniques that were started. Doctor, you were saying that you've spotted yours. I mean, yours have been growing actually really quickly. Certainly from the pictures that I saw, it looked impressive there.
Right after the show last week, I just popped them right in the soil. I put them about a half inch right. Well, I shouldn't say soil. I put them a half inch below the medium. It's Cocoa Perlite 50/50, and I watered them, and bam! Within 48 hours, I had little plants. It looked like, and I was like, whoa. I was so excited I had to get out the video. I sent you guys a little back chat video, and I was like, hey, man, check this out. It was pretty exciting. And I think I learned that here on the show like a couple seasons back. Somebody did that, and they were ahead of us, it seemed like. So that's what I did.
Hey, Doc. Sorry, guys, interrupt. Hey, Doc, did you go straight 50-50 with your mix then? Like a cup of cocoa to a cup of perlite?
I mean, I'm not gonna say that I measured it or weighed it, but I mean, I eyeballed it.
Okay. I was just curious.
Yeah. Growers
I mean,
50-50.
it's close enough, man.
I'm just saying,
Doctor math.
is a lot of perlite.
Yeah, no, I bought a 4 cubic foot bag of perlite and I used about 3 of it, in a 2 cubic foot bag of, so I might even be over, to be honest. But it's what it looked like what was right.
Gotcha.
Oh, excellent. Yeah. And there was a question that did come up about hydroton and the use of that in the autopot system when you're setting it up. Ben, is it advisable to do that or not to do it, or is there times when you should do it?
Are you talking about just putting a layer in the bottom of the pots?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, you can do. Over many years, I've tried with and without. I don't think it makes a difference. I think the biggest question is, I think if you're going to do a 50-50 mix with perlite cocoa, then you don't want to reduce the capillary action. So sometimes the pebbles will do that. So you guys have got, what's that? 4-gallon pots, I think, the 3.9s maybe. I think in gallons, we call them 15 liters. So in that size pot, then you don't want to restrict the capillary action. Otherwise, all your roots are just going to head to the bottom and potentially come out of the pot. And you don't really want that in an auto pot. So you want a good wet at the bottom. You're using a very high aeration mix. So I don't feel the need, but if people want to experiment, then they can do. You can put an inch of Hydroton clay pebbles in the bottom of the pots. I don't particularly like the Hydroton brand because it has a very alkaline base to it, and that keeps rising. If you do a glass test with that particular brand, you'll find that it has a very high pH. So the Yonkin brand or Gold Label brand, I'm not sure what's available over there in the States, but I would check that in a glass first before you use it, because you don't have the ability to control pH like you do in a recirculating or run to waste system. Then you need to be a little bit mindful of those factors.
Cool. So yeah, maybe I guess if you were running it in pure cocoa, having something like that at the bottom, or even maybe just putting an extra layer of perlite at the bottom and just pure cocoa straight above it.
Yeah, I mean, you can do. I mean, the principle that people are going on is for drainage, but you're watering from the bottom. So I mean, it's kind of a, it's an adopted technique that doesn't really suit what you're doing right now. So people do things out of habit, where really they're not actually thinking about the process of how the system works. So you need that capillary action. It's always wet at the bottom. Putting pebbles in is just taking up space, really. So
yeah. No, cool. And yeah, and also now it comes to the really early stage of growth. The feeding regime. What are people doing? How are they approaching it? The one thing to bear in mind, of course, is that for the soil growers, is you're dealing with cocoa now. There is no nutrient value in that thing whatsoever. It's completely inert, essentially. It's whatever you put in is what it's going to get. So right now, if you're just using water, the plant's running on its natural reserves. At some point, you're going to have to start feeding it, and a lot sooner than if you're growing in soil. You're going to have to start feeding it.
Hell yeah.
So this is, I guess, where it's like the instructions on the back of the bottle. This is where it gets important.
Foliar sprays, man. Foliar spraying. That's how I'm feeding right now.
Okay.
Yeah. So what I would just chip in there and say that obviously most bottles list what would be considered a full strength solution. So that's for mature plants. So good rules of thumb there is to maybe quarter that for young seedlings, young plants, early rooted cuttings. Maybe stay on that while you're in that size of pot or cell. And then as you step them up, then you can also step up your nutrient regime as well. Maybe going up to half strength, then 3/4. For auto pot growers, I would say maybe you need just to stay at 3/4 strength. Obviously, this is strain dependent as well. So depending on what your particular cultivar likes and what its habits like and how vigorous that's growing, obviously coupled with environmental conditions as well, but we're assuming that everybody's got that just right. Yeah, so obviously increase your nutrient as your plants progress, but you want to be feeding all the time, really. So there should always be food consistently in the water supply, because like you said, Pete, that it's an inert medium. Hey, that's really weird talking to yourself.
Slightly off-putting.
Yeah. I mean, I spend a lot of time talking to myself, but not necessarily looking and talking to myself at the same time. So, yeah, so that's what I would recommend. So if you guys aren't familiar with either running hydro or using inert substrates, then bear in mind that you're not just trying to keep your plants alive, you're trying to get them to grow to their full potential. So make sure that you have a small amount of food, at least. Even with seedlings, I would say as soon as they pop, if you're in a 50-50 perlite cocoa mix, you want to be, personally, I would have watered that cocoa through first with some quarter strength food, and then pot my seeds directly in the pots, or if you prefer to start them in towels, then that's cool, and then transplant in. But then you really want to keep that quarter strength feed in there with every watering. You won't overfeed. People think that giving them food too regularly is overfeeding. It's not. It's about how strong your food is. So, I mean, if you take recirculating systems, for instance, there's always food consistently in there. Plants are fine. It's just if you go too strong with the food, then that's where you'll risk overfeeding. But what you don't want to be doing right now is underfeeding either. So don't be too cautious, but you use the quarter, half, 3/4 strength rule.
Cool. And then Jeff, your experience, you've obviously grown this cultivar and you've used New Millennium nutrients. So given your experience, and you're also a cocoa grower as well, so that this is kind of in your wheelhouse there. What would you be recommending with regards to nutrient strength at this stage?
I think Ben is spot on. Start off really light, about a quarter strength. I like the idea of watering that cocoa before you put the seedlings in there. Not enough people do that technique. I always talk about watering before we pot. That's a really good idea. It also helps not to fucking flood that pot and wash the seed away. Yeah. So I think Ben's got the perfect idea. Start off a quarter strength. And then when we start seeing them get a little bit bigger, as soon as you start seeing a little bit yellowing, start pushing it a little bit harder. I honestly, I'm more familiar with these plants, so I push from the beginning. I start pushing it, and when I call it getting the nails done. When I see the tips of the leaves start looking like they're getting their fingernails printed or painted, that's when I kind of dial back the nutrient. I want to see how hard I can push it. Yeah. I don't want us to all do that right now and destroy the plants from the beginning, but that's how I do it. So I think we're on the right track. Start a quarter. When we start seeing a little bit of yellowing, go to a half strength. And then when we start flowering, probably go to about 3/4 of the recommended dosage. I think Ben nailed it.
And also one of the, it is an advantage of working with something like an inert substrate working in hydros. If you feel like you might have gone a little too hot, you can actually, you see the effect very quickly that you've put too much in, and then you can sort of counteract it fairly quickly as well. So although you have ultimate control, you can truly fuck it up if you want to and do it spectacularly fast. But at the same time, the soon as you say, when you see the fingernails getting done, you can back off, and that backing off is almost instantaneous. It's not like it's a 3-4 day or a week wait for it to back
Check
off.
the EC right then, see where you are, write down that EC, and no, that's the limit for this plant, and then kind of don't go any further than there. At that point, if you want to, you can dilute the reservoir. You can add water to the res and then fix the pH after that, or you can keep going right there. That's the beauty of cocoa. You can change things on the fly. And if you want to, you can flush it. Like if you just need to run water right through it, say, oh shit, this was way too hot. Run around to water through it. Don't If it's already wet and you've got a problem, don't try to flush a wet plant. That's just you're gonna drown it and overfeed it. So it's gonna be a double problem. Let that overfeed kind of dry up a little, then flush it out. And then the next time water it a little lighter and you'll get right back on track. But don't try to flush that wet plant. But you can rescue cocoa so quickly. Every day is a new day in cocoa. Every day is a new day.
And that's a good point, Jeff, is that obviously with a high proportion of perlite in there as well, with a 50-50 mix, perlite can only hold on to a certain quantity of water, and you cannot over wet perlite. So when you've got a very high mix like that, and also perlite lets go, it has a very good ion exchange, so it will let go of everything. So as soon as you flush that through, there's no nutrient in it. And so you can start, so if you make a mistake, you can rectify that very quickly, unlike soil where you're talking maybe at least a week, maybe longer for you to see signs of correction occurring. So cocoa perlite mix, yeah, beautiful. You can, if you make a mistake, you can flush through, like Jeff said, with just water. If you want, you can use a demineralizing solution, which is normally a chelated solution. And yeah, that will flush right through.
So yeah, somebody in chat, Green Puffin Man, asking about flushing with auto pots. So yeah, you can. My understanding, and Ben obviously step in.
Sure, yeah. I mean, at this stage, obviously, we're talking about you're starting your plants off in small pots. So I guess what we're kind of discussing the overfeeding at this stage. By the time you go into an auto pot, I think if you follow the rules, it's going to be very hard to make a mistake with overfeeding. Yeah, I mean, what you can do is disconnect, turn the tap off on the tank so your supply's cut. Maybe if your plant's still small enough, obviously you can lift the plant out and flush it through externally. If you're further ahead and you've also made a mistake, further down the line, then that might be better just to I'm generally reluctant to say flush through the top, but if there's a need to, then yes, you can flush through the top. You should still just be able to lift the pot up enough to slide the tray out from underneath it, empty that tray out, and you should be good to go again.
And then in terms of, I know it's, in terms of the season where we are right now, the concept of flushing for the final stage is a good few weeks away. But when it comes to an auto pot, as Jeff mentioned on the last time, traditionally when people think of flushing or just leaching the substrate, your concept is to pour from the top. But, it's just naturally, that's kind of what you think. But with the autopot system, it's bottom fed, but you would just be running pure water into the system at the end and just let the plant use up everything that it can in the substrate without adding anything new. I mean, there's no flushing per se in the sense of flushing to runoff that you could do.
Not really. I mean, flushing's a good topic. We'll probably do a whole show on that towards the end, I'm sure. And there's a lot of conversation there on why you should flush, if you should flush, and in what circumstances that applies. But so I think we'll get to that as a later show rather than covering it all right now in this show at this stage. But yeah.
But yeah, it is something you can do in an auto pot at a very summarized
potentially
level.
Yeah. I mean, again, most people will just tend to back off and run on plain water for a while. If you really feel you need to flush those pots through, then there kind of are ways to do that through the top, but it's a bit more labor intensive, and depending on how big your plants are or whether you've got them growing through nets, that could, there are potential holdbacks on that.
Yeah, no, definitely. So, and then again, at this early stage of growth, I mean, I don't think Jeff, I don't know if there's anything that people should be looking out for. I don't think there's anything we're really going to notice, but over the coming weekend, you're going to start to see, the first real sets of leaves starting to kick in.
Start seeing the shape of the plant. That's what excites me when we start seeing the actual, her body, her shape, what she's shaped like. Then we know what kind of phenotypes we're leaning towards. That's when I really get excited. Sorry to interrupt you, Pete. I'm really curious about the germination rates. How many seeds did everybody pop and how many were successful?
I'm 100% right now.
Awesome.
Okay, everything but one, and that was in the cocoa. I have 3 in soil, 4 in cocoa pots. Everything popped except for 1 in cocoa.
All right.
Okay, it means you're gonna have to take one out of the soil and put it in the cocoa.
Don't do that.
Basically, yeah, basically. No, but she's got one more day. I'm gonna give her another day because she was like kind of a straggler. So
No, cool. Yeah, I know from the Mystery Growers report that they had 100% success rate.
Satisfaction.
Yeah.
Mine all came up. I popped 4 and all 4 came up quick.
I love it. Good work,
Yep.
you guys. Thank you.
Hey, no, good work. I mean, to you, that's testament to the genetics, to be honest.
Yeah.
Good quality seed. Yeah.
And
Not
those were just
overbaked.
those were normal packs. I didn't select any specific packs for you guys. I went to the bank and I said I need this many orange gasms, and I pulled them out. So that's just random packs. Good work.
I had tails in 18 hours.
Nice.
I mean,
The
they
gold-
showed tails in 18 hours. So.
The Golden Goat crosses are vigorous. They're definitely vigorous. I love it. Thank you guys. Sorry I interrupted you, Pete. We started asking that question in the beginning and totally got derailed from that question. So I wanted to get back there.
No, it's absolutely fine. Derail away. Oh yeah, no, Green Pup and seeing your background at NFT and new to Cocoa and Autopots, just seeing from the comments there. I do think quite a few people are going to start to switch on to the whole idea of gravity-fed watering systems. It's a real time saver, and again, in a commercial operation, it's a money saver. Geez, you're not having to run pumps and shit like that. It does make a difference. So one of the other things about the whole show, of course, is that we're doing all this data capture and data gathering, primarily to also be able to give feedback to Jeff, and that's from one of the other sponsors of the platform, which is P&L Grow Systems. And just wanted to check with everybody so far. Is everybody set up? I think it's off your screen there, Ben. You're pointing at something that isn't there.
Oh, yeah. No, sorry, it was you, dude. I forgot people can't see that. Yeah.
I don't know how it's showing up on YouTube at the moment.
No.
So has everybody so far got it set up in their space, got their room, the Minder at least set up and recording data?
Yep.
Cool.
yep, I'll start entries tonight though.
Yeah, and so actually, it's one of these things where the journal system for it is probably really suited to using something like Autopot, because having to keep track of watering that's a mess is happening automatically, and then you're just trying to log all the little ad hoc things that you're doing that could make a difference as you're going along.
Hey, Pete, do you want to just tell all the viewers what the unit is that we're using for logging?
Yeah. Actually, I should have. I'm looking behind me. I should actually have one to hand. And let me turn off this background because that's just going to create all sorts of problems. Reality kicks in.
Whoa!
Oh,
Just
so
come round for the
boring.
trip, dude.
England looks boring.
Yeah, you thought it was all bright colors. Oops. So, disconnect these out of here.
Where's the trolley?
All right, mate. Don't take the fucking piss. So the Minder is this little unit here, which is what we call the Minder, and with each one of these, you get 2, and this is the new sensor housing. So showing it for the first time to the public.
Ooh.
Nice.
I'm taking over your role there, Tyler.
Oh, damn it.
So what you get is an ambient temperature and humidity sensor, and these cables are 2.5 meters long each. What's it, about 6.5 feet, somewhere around there? I don't know do feet, I do metric. And you also get a temperature probe, which is waterproof, so you can actually use this for keeping a track of the temperature in your grow medium or in your nutrient tank or reservoir, or you just use it as another ambient air temperature sensor. So if you're in a small space, let's say you're growing in a little tent, 2x2, maybe even 4x4, When a 4x4, you kind of almost at the point of maybe you need two, but I would suggest what you do is you hang both of the sensors at the same height in the room and diagonally opposite each other, and you'll get 2 temperature points and you'll get a humidity profile. And if you're absolutely desperate, you can do a fairly easy calculation that will allow you to know, given the temperature at the other place and knowing the temperature and humidity at the other point, you can calculate the humidity for the spot where you don't have a humidity sensor. You can get a fairly good guess at what it would be.
I do similar, but I put one higher and lower. I do the diagonal, but also one up higher and one a little bit lower, just for an idea.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good idea to hang, like to drop one like this one, to drop it on the floor and keep an eye on the floor temperature. Like if you're this time of year, not so much of a problem in the Northern Hemisphere, but in the Southern Hemisphere, if you're watching and you're going into winter, it starts to get cooler, the cooler air is coming in, and if you don't keep an eye on the lower foot of your grow space, the roots can get quite chilly. You tend to be walking in wearing boots and jeans. If you really want to get a good feeling of a grow space, walk in barefoot, and you'll get an idea if it's too cold to be standing in there barefoot, then the roots are too cold. It shouldn't be uncomfortable. You want to keep the roots at around 18 degrees Celsius. Below 15, you're really going to inhibit growth, and you're not going to have a plant that's particularly happy. You don't want them to get too warm either, but sort of the band of about 18 to 22 degrees Celsius is probably optimal. And then a canopy temperature of about 25 to 27 degrees Celsius, depending on what you're looking for. So that then captures data through to a centralized platform, which is web-based, so you can access it from anywhere, which is a real bonus. So you can be anywhere in the world and see what's going on. It's not a Bluetooth system where you have to be within 10 meters of it to understand what's going on, which means if you're still shackled to having to be within 10 meters. 20th century, going sit on a beach somewhere far, far away and keep an eye on the grow. And it literally does give you a degree of freedom. As soon as you are growing a crop such as this, you do realize it does need care and attention, and if something goes wrong, it can go horribly wrong. So getting an alert when temperatures suddenly spike can save your ass. That could be an indication that fans failed and air cons failed. Something's gone wrong. One of the real problems is the second you leave that environment, you close the door, zip the tent up, you don't know what's going on. So yeah, that's what we try to do, is to help you understand what's going on. But let me show. So this is live data that comes through showing current temperature, humidity, and we also calculate the VPD.
So this is the web-based platform, yes, Pete?
Yep, this is the web-based platform, and you can view it on your mobile phone, laptop, etc. I would recommend that when for a mobile phone, the front dashboard, which is these readings that we're seeing now, and in fact can change it to show the dials, and you can have it in Fahrenheit or in Celsius. So
you want on dashboard.
Yep, I'm going to go back to put the display dials up on the dashboard so you can see them. So you can have it like this, so you can just have the numeric data. Makes it nice and easy to read, and you can set where your minimum, maximum parameters are to get alerts.
Yeah, and you can also hit the which one is it for that? Oh, for the show hide stats.
Yep. If you want to see min and max, or ignore that. Yeah,
well, that was chilly. Was that Monday night?
It got chilly.
Yeah.
Briefly. And you get min and max for the last 24 hours. So this is looking at the rolling stats for the last 24 hours. And you can see what they were, what the min and max was. If anything is tripped up, you can see like these went below the minimum values and are showing up in yellow. So at some point my minimum temperature actually did go below what my minimum threshold level is.
Sure. And so when it hits that red band, is that when you'll get an email alert?
When it goes into the red band or the yellow band, you can set it to get an email alert, and it will tell you what the current temperature is that tripped it, or current humidity level is that tripped it, on which sensor, and what the threshold level is and what the current reading is.
Right.
It will continue to tell you every.
Oh, he froze. It'll tell you.
Nope.
It'll tell you often. You can set it up to remind you as often as you'd like in the settings. You can have it email you every 30 seconds or every 30 minutes or just about anywhere in between there. I play with it a lot. I've got mine up on my screen right now because I check on this thing a lot. I'm kind of OCD about it. It's also a good
Me too.
excuse. If you've got somebody that's just talking to you, you can go, oh, dude, my VPD is all fucked up. I got to go. And you just show them the screen and they have no idea what this means, but it looks important. And then you just leave. It's pretty awesome.
I will say you can also set your parameters, so you can set whatever temperatures you want and highs and lows with this. So it's different for everybody.
I think you've done that before there, Jeff.
You know, it's worked before.
Hey,
It worked great.
back in the room, Pete.
I covered for you. I've posted a show
Did a
before.
great job, but well picked up.
Where was I?
You were showing off the PL Minder screen. We were talking about setting parameters and notifications.
Yes. So that back on the screen there.
Yeah, there we go.
So yeah, what you can do is each Minder you can configure to have its own set of parameters. So which one are we looking at here? You can tell it, you can name the sensors as well. So you have an idea of where it is, makes it a little bit easier to understand what you're looking at. So if you have the metal probe, the waterproof one stuck in the grow medium, call it medium, you know where it is. You give the
top
actual
one.
Minder itself a name. So you can say back left corner or grow space 1, tent 5, or I don't know, whatever you want to name it. And then you can say where the sensor that's attached to that unit is located. So when you've got a lot of them, it's handy to have a naming convention that lets you follow what's going on. Time zone's important so that you will see the data in whatever time zone you're actually in. That's relevant. And then you can set a min and max temperature for the probe, it's just doing temperature data. And then the ambient one, you can set a min and max for temperature and a min and max for humidity. You have an option to give it like this delay notification of X number of seconds. And what that's doing is, it says if I get a weird reading, I'll wait another 108 or 3 minutes. I'll check it again. If it's still outside of the parameter range, then I'll notify you. So it avoids, the door being opened and the temperature suddenly spiking and coming back down again, or an errant reading from tripping it up. The notify interval is how often it will remind you or notify you that it's out of range. If you set it to 0, it'll only tell you once. If you set it to 1 minute, every minute you'll be told it's out of range while it's still out of range. So you probably don't want to go for that. I would recommend every half hour, an hour. So I'll put it on a 0. It depends how closely and eye you're trying to keep on things, but it will notify you a lot if you're not careful. And then anyone that you're not using, you can just deactivate and it doesn't appear on the dashboard. And then we do charts.
Yeah, get the chart.
When he says a lot, I want to just go in there and say I had it set up and it gave me 300 emails in one day.
It will.
Yeah, that's obviously that's stupid. It's not necessary, but you definitely want to set your parameters outside that zone.
Yeah.
I've been there. I've had to go fix that.
Yes, I did.
And I would also say that the threshold levels that you're setting are, the extremes. These are not, or if it just gets, it's like when I get this notification, something has gone wrong. I need to go and have a look. So, if you don't set it for 30 degrees centigrade, when your optimal temperature is 27, because you're going to hit it, you want to have it at like 38, because if it gets up to there, then something's gone atrociously wrong, for instance. It has to be reasonable. Don't make it too tight. parameter setting. I think it's one parameter setting. So yeah, and then with the charts, we do up to the last 4 weeks of data you can look at on a chart. And let me just plot that quickly. It takes a while, and of course live demos. So there's 4 weeks of charted data from the environment. You can opt to say, I don't want to look at the humidity data, and I just want to look at temperature data. That's the sense of doing some odd things. But here you can track and you can see how things were going.
Yeah.
What we include here is we include dew point temperature readings and calculation. And for a grower, the dew point calculation is really important to follow, because this is one that's probably going to be your biggest indicator of something like powdery, not as much powdery mildew, but bud rot is a big issue.
Botrytis.
Yeah, botrytis, you know, if your dew point, so for those who aren't familiar with what dew point is, it's the temperature at which condensation will occur. So in the environment, as an example, I'll have to zoom in on a bit here. Right now, at that point in time, with, let me throw the humidity in. So at this point in time, with a relative humidity of 53% and a temperature of 23 degrees centigrade, if nothing changed except the temperature dropped to 13 degrees, at that point you would get condensation. You add no more moisture in, take no more moisture out of the environment, and let the temperature plummet. At 13 degrees, it will start to condense. And bear in mind that surfaces of your plant, your leaves are probably about 2 degrees cooler than the actual ambient temperature. So as your temperature, your ambient temperature gets closer to dew point, the risk of condensation forming on surfaces starts to go up. And that's when molds, etc., become a problem. So keeping an eye on the dew point and trying to keep it a good 6 or so degrees away from the ambient temperature at all times is optimal, if you can.
What I really like about the graphs as well is if you're on a touch screen, you can just pinch that to dial in and increase the granulation of the chart. So it's really handy to use on a touch screen. So you can just widen that up and dial right into a certain date or time point, and really get a better insight into what's going on. It's really good.
I did not know that.
And then the other thing you've got here with the charts, let me get back to them. You've got the VPD chart down the bottom here showing you, it's all over the show. And we've just put in some indicative markers here. So, you know, VPD for most people and a lot of people is quite new. So just trying to get an understanding of it. What we tried to do was say, look, there is a minimum VPD. You don't really want to go below this. You want to stay in the sweet spot, which is that bright green area. So around a VPD of 10 or 1 in hectopascals. If you can maintain it in that spot the whole way through your growth cycle, you should have a great crop at the end of it. Doesn't matter what you're growing predominantly. You can keep it in that sweet spot all the way through, it'll be fine. What people do is at the early stage, where we are now, in fact, you want to have a very low VPD. What you're trying to do is avoid putting too much strain on the plant to have to do nutrient uptake.
Yeah. So you're reducing transpiration. Is that correct?
Yeah, you know, it's let it use some of its natural reserves and give it time to put some roots down. This is why foliar feeding and keeping the relative humidity really high. This, you know, a propagation dome works really well at the early stages. It allows it to put the root structure out without it putting too much strain on that root structure from the word go.
So this is kind of why VPD is important for your plants, really. It's going to affect how your plants uptake both water and nutrient solution, particularly in hydroponics. It's particularly important to be keeping a check on your VPD, because that's going to then give you feedback in how strong you mix your nutrients, depending on what your VPD levels are like. So obviously, if you're managing to keep that in the sweet spot, then you can go ahead and you can give them a good rate of feed. If your VPD's high, then your plants aren't going to be transparent and they're not going to be uptaking. So maybe you can probably keep a good level of nutrition. But when your VPD is low, that means your plants are transpiring harder. That means is that the other way around?
It's the other way around. Yeah,
I always get confused with that one. So it's the other way around. Okay.
Yeah,
so when your VPD is lower or higher?
So as the VPD goes up, the atmosphere is getting drier, so it's putting more of a drain and demand on it, so it's going to transpire higher. Basically, if you look at it, as VPD heads, as VPD heads to zero, transpiration heads to zero. At zero, and what's interesting, zero is also dew point. So when you hit dew point temperature, your VPD will be at zero. So those two factors are actually those two variables are really closely correlated with each other because they're actually governed by the two exact same things. Temperature and humidity is what drives both of them, and hence they're very closely they're correlated exactly. In fact,
and obviously the chart. If you do get confused, then obviously having a visual representation in chart is going to rule that out for you. So you can see what to do and adjust your nutrient solution accordingly. Or better still, maybe try and correct your environment, which is obviously always the key thing to do first.
Yeah, and now this comes, again, we're at this early stage of growth. There's some tips and tricks of how do you maintain a high humidity at this stage. And let me also just warn everybody that high humidity and environmental monitoring, those are the enemies of each other. If you're going to deliberately be running a environment at 90 plus humidity, even above like 85% humidity, you've got to understand that you're going to kill environmental monitoring equipment at that point. It doesn't like super high humidity for very, very long. But the point I'm making is if you're putting a propagation dome over something, don't go and stick a hygrometer in there. Assume it's high humidity. Stick the temperature probe in there because you probably want to track the temperature, but don't stick a humidity sensor in there. It's a given.
Yeah, exactly.
Death, taxes, and that's going to be really fucking humid.
One thing I like about my PL Minder unit, I can see on this chart when a piece of equipment died on me. You can see, I don't know if the camera will focus on it, but you can see there's a drop right here. Where am I? Right there.
Yeah.
And a fan didn't come on, an extraction fan didn't come on. So my humidity and my heat spiked up and I could tell I got a notification and I can see it happen on my Minder unit. So I can see exactly what time, when it happened. I can see when it all fucking failed. I know when that piece, I know what time to put RIP on the epitaph for that piece of equipment.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, we've had a lot of feedback with people saying, their fans died and they've managed to run home to save their crop. So that's all good.
Yeah, it would have gotten 90 in there if I didn't get the message.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, it's one of those things. We've tried to price it as well that this is insurance. It's a peace of mind thing. You might have gone and spent thousands and thousands of dollars and pounds on OptiClimates and all sorts of bits and pieces, but how do you know what it's doing when you're not there and that it's correctly configured? And usually for a lot of these customers who've used it, it becomes a case of I need to adjust the airflow around my environment. One thing I tell everybody is a sensor, one of these things only measures that. It doesn't measure anything more. It cannot tell you what's going on over 3 feet away. The same with this one. It only tells you what's happening in this very finite little space. So if you want to actually understand what's going on, you've got to put multiples of them all over the place. And then you start to understand the difference between A and B. So I can work out what the temperature range would be. if you're using an environment monitoring platform or a system like an OptiClimate, just using them as an example, I mean, just as a name brand, it doesn't, brand X, call them whatever. If it only has one temperature probe on one humidity probe, it can only tell you what's going on where those two probes are located. So at the other side of the room, the environment can be completely different. And it often is if you don't have good airflow. Right by the entrance where this thing is sucking air in, it's probably saying, oh, it's fantastic. You know, it's regulating that, or it's blowing out, it's regulating it for there. But you need to go and measure behind the plants, under the plants, around the place, and then adjust your fans and air ducts to circulate the air. And throughout the grow, you have to keep a track of this. You know, when things move and they suddenly become, you know, go from a foot to 3 feet to 5 feet to 6 feet, airflow gets changed. It's not the same as it was when they were only a foot high. So the plant in the back corner now suddenly isn't getting any air movement around it. And it's really humid and getting cold at night. And that's where your bud rot sets in.
It's always that one plant in the back corner. It's always where the problem starts.
Yeah.
I wish that corner just didn't exist sometimes.
It always fucking
I'm
starts.
bound to stick my fan there.
That's where the carbon filter goes.
Yeah.
And that's what we need, circular grow tents.
Yes.
No,
I think he's being
Hey, I'm claiming
truthful.
that.
I mean, like in a greenhouse setting, you basically want your air to go in a circular pattern. You know, you try to get it to go around the greenhouse, so it's all constantly moving air. And you know, so that would be awesome to have a circular greenhouse.
I mean, I think one of the best ones I've seen was those like a sock.
Dome.
Is it that sock that they had? The clear one that has got holes punched in it that come up, and you can run it along the floor as well as along the top. And the nice thing is it's inflatable, so if you kick it, it doesn't break. You know, it's not a built-in bit of structure that you have to worry about.
I've had growers who make put like a false floor in their grow room that's full of holes, and then get a fan, blow that down, so you've got that uprising air all over. But yeah, the air diffusing socks are great. Yeah.
And then it blows all the warm air from the bottom up, and that has a number of benefits. One, it makes it very difficult for things to settle down on the leaves because you've got this constant updraft of air. So it really helps as a part of an IPM program to prevent things from landing on the leaves. You know, optimal airflow in a grow environment over a canopy should be about 2 meters a second. Will like quarter down your potential of getting stuff like powdery mildew, because it's enough airflow to stop the spores from being able to settle. They keep being moved on and moved on. Stagnant air is a real problem in the grow environment.
And that's also important for, I mean, leaves don't have muscles to, so they rely on passing airflow over the leaves, in order for gas exchange, and also removing moisture through transpiration as well. So having that moving air over your leaves is ultimately important.
And then one of the other things, sorry, just go back to the platform here. One of the other bits about it is the Grow Journal and the Grow Space setup. So, and this is probably where, if you know, when you're getting a bit more serious about what you're doing, you want to understand, why did I get the crop I got? Why did I get the yield I got? What did I do different between run A and run B when I thought I did it all the same, but suddenly I've got something very different. And it's being able to track those minor environmental differences, and all the little things you did along the way, but also understanding that maybe the size of the room, the lights, the pots, all of those are all variables into the final output of your growth. And so on the journal, which I'll call up now. So what we can do here is we have the ability to have grow spaces defined and set up. And I'll go through actually setting up one from scratch. And we're going to, so we'll add a grow space, and we're going to say that, I'll just call this demo room. We can pick what type of grow space it is. Is it a greenhouse, open, partially sealed, sealed? Partially sealed would be, you built a cupboard. A sealed environment is a true sealed environment. There's no external air exchange. It's all being done. It's CO2. It's fully sealed, properly sealed up environment. And then a tent is a tent. I just sort of distinguish between a tent and an actual physical structure that somebody might have built that is not also a proper sealed environment. So we'll just say it's like a tent. And yeah, it is in cubic meters at the moment, but well, let's say it's 2 cubic meters, and we can change this at any point as well. And we'll want to know what time zone the tent is in, and we'll go with UK summertime. Why not? And then we've created our space, and now with this space, we can start to do things. We can add things into it. So I've got this. No, it doesn't have any lights, it doesn't have any minders in it, and it doesn't have any containers. And what you are able to do is, it's like this main room over here will say that it's got 2 lights in it. I've spec'd what type of lights they are, so I can see that they're sand lights and what power they are. It has a minder in it, and it's got 2 containers growing various bits and pieces in it. And I can see what size they are, etc. as an example on this one. And to do all of this, under the grow spaces, we've got the option to add containers or to create our own. And we'll just do one here quickly, because everybody here is using an autopot system, and we actually have autopot as a type of container that you can select. I think they're 15 liters, I think is what everybody's got, if I'm not mistaken. So for everybody in the US, you can just put it in as 15 liters, and the grow medium, you can put in as a cocoa perlite mix and give it a name. I mean, you've got plant, in this case, you're growing 4 plants. You're only actually having to do 4 of these, which is quite nice, makes it easier actually, as opposed to doing a couple of hundred. But, call it, pot 1, pot 2, pot 3, pot 4, for instance, order pot 1, order pot 2, order pot 3. Once you've added the pot, so we'll just call this auto pot 1, let's say. If you're adding more, you can just say add another. The next thing I've got to do is for instance, I've got lights. I'll add lights, and I can come in here and I can say what type of light it is. Give it a name. Bearing in mind the way this system works is you could only have 1 light installed in one place at a time. You can't have the same light installed in 2 locations. So yeah, you're building your inventory up here of what physical equipment you actually have and where it's installed. So you can track it and correlate the data accordingly. We'll call this demo light. And it says an HPS and 600 watts. So we've added a light. Now the next thing we'll do is we've done the container, the grow space, the lights, and we'll add some plants. Now, unlike the lights and the containers, and the same goes for the containers, they can only be in one location at once. So you can actually, essentially what we end up with here is you're tracking the performance of a container in this environment and the contents of that container, which is this plant. But you can have multiples of the same plant in different containers. So while you have to add 4 containers for Orangegasm, you're only going to have to add the plant once, and you're just going to say that Orangegasm is in part 1, 2, 3, and 4. If you were doing a pheno hunt, you would actually say it would like the Orangegasm 1 is in pot 1, Orangegasm 2 is in pot 2, and you would add the plants in as each seed being its own plant and its own pheno that you were essentially tracking at that point. And you can type of plants, short day or auto flowering. So short day being ones that require a short photo period to trigger them, and that covers a wide range of plants. And the others are ones that will automatically flower when they just hit a certain amount of maturity. And you can put in a best guess at what the flowering time might be, who the plant breeder is, and you can put in it'll show you which ones you've already got, so you don't necessarily double up. I'm not going to add one. Once we've done all of that, we now can go back to the grow space setup, the demo room, and I can now configure the space. So I've got a container I can add that's got, actually I haven't finished configuring the container, but anyway, the AutoPot container here. I'm going to add that to the demo room. I'm going to add my, add the lights. And just for argument's sake, I'm just going to pick these other miners aren't actually up and running, but I'll just add one. And so now in this room, I have that pot, and I will now start to track the information from that room. And the nice thing is it's now, and I can create a journal. I'm going to start a new journal, and you pick the room that you're going to do a journal for. And because the equipment that I've picked for the demo room isn't actually up and running, it won't work. But I could pick, what is this, a demo journal? And now I have a journal that's starting to track all the environmental data that was associated with that room. And that's because we said this miner is in that space. And I can have multiple miners in that space. So I could actually say I've got 4 or 5 miners in that room, and I'm collecting all of that data. It's all being grouped together and being tracked in that environment, in that room. And then next week we can see how, some of that data starts to show up in the journal. It needs time to collect. Most of us haven't had enough time to be collecting any significant data yet. Next week, we'll start to show the journal charts and things that come up from there. Cool. But yeah, any questions from anybody? Sorry, I mean, that's a bit lengthy there. I realized we've been rambling on. But yeah, any questions?
I learned a lot. That was cool. There were things I didn't even know.
Great. I mean, and the idea here is what I want people to be able to do at the end of grow cycles is to look at it and say, hey, I found that my room that had loads of fabric pots in it, I saw that the dehumidifier had to run a hell of a lot of the time. And then the room that had just all hard plastic pots in it, the humidifier was working its arse off. Now, maybe what I can actually do is I can take some fabric pots, some plastic pots, mix the two together, and I have humidifiers working a little bit and dehumidifiers working a little bit. But having the data to back those kind of decisions. And because you've now collected, at the very end, when we close out all of these journals, you get this pot into this size container with this grow medium, followed this fertigation regime, and all of this environmental data under these lights gave me this yield. That's the information you get at the end of it. So now you can also see, hang on, if I want to, people often say that like fabric pots, because they're air prune, you get better root structure, you can get bigger yield from a fabric pot of 15 liters than you would from a solid plastic pot of 15 liters. I mean, it's often something you hear going around, is that the air pots allow just better, I guess, more roots to be put down in the way that they prune them off, that it's forcing the root structure to come out more in the core of the plant, if that makes sense. But yeah, you would actually be able to take a look and see if I'm wanting to replace some of my fabric pots, how big of a plastic pot do I need to go to maintain the yield? So you're not guessing anymore. You can actually say, all right, I'm going to have to replace the 15 liter fabric pots with 20 liter or 25 liter plastic pots, and I'll maintain my yield still.
I'll be able to see things like I say that I think the plants get taco leaf when they get a little bit too warm. I'll actually be able to know, is that happening from humidity? Is that from dryness? Or is that actually the heat that's doing it? I'll be able to see things like that now from other people instead of just my own data. So that's kind of helpful.
Yeah. And the idea is to be able to show, again, at the end of it, this, you understand what I did, when I did it, what was the outcome. and then to be able to replay that and look back at it over time. Because that's often what happens. You think, oh, I did exactly the same thing. Why isn't it the same? What did I do differently? And for most growers, writing this shit down is a pain in the ass. So we try to automate it.
And then everyone's so stoned, they fucking forget what they even need to write down. They go do it. And what else did I do in there? No, doesn't happen.
Did I add that?
Right.
Yeah, what I found really interesting when I added the minder to my tent was, say I had like 4 or 5 plants in there, and 2 or 3 of them finished up. If I pulled those 2 or 3 out, it completely threw everything out of whack. It was just from the excess moisture from it going through its transpiration and the respiration, and it wasn't just excess moisture in the soil. It was crazy, just overnight. That quick, just how much it affects your VPD with just adding and subtracting plants and at what phases they're at, how big they are. It's crazy, because I didn't start using the monitor until the last season. And once I plugged it in and started seeing my stuff, it was kind of shocking. I plugged it in and I was at like 19, 20, 21 on my VPD, which is extremely dry, high VPD rates. Really not a good spot to be in.
Yeah, it's something that does take people by surprise to start off with, and you do spend a lot of time going like, okay, whoa, hang on, we're doing perfectly fine before you put that thing in. You'll do perfectly fine. Just don't try and change everything at once. And I think actually, the VPD thing is probably the one that catches people out the most. They suddenly start trying to chase this thing, and it's like, whoa, okay, hold on. I understand that it's a guideline, and it really is. Get comfortable with controlling one aspect of it. And the thing about VPD, it's understand what is the optimal temperature that the plant photosynthesizes at, because photosynthesis is a chemical reaction. And if it's too cool, too hot, it doesn't happen at its optimal rate. You want the sweet spot, which is around about 25 to 27 degrees Celsius. And then you look at what is the humidity to have the VPD at 10 hectopascals or 1 kilopascal. And then you're trying to just regulate the humidity and keep that in check. And as your temperature goes down, your humidity is going to have to come down with it to keep it in line.
And from what I find, basically the temperatures and parameters that most of us growers are trying to chase for our grow room tends to be in that VPD sweet spot. Because I didn't really do anything different when I installed the minder. It just was close in them parameters. Like it's the temperature, 50 to 60 at 70 to 80 degrees. Right in them parameters really work out for your VPD.
I agree. If you were doing it right, you're already doing it right.
Yeah,
also, go ahead, Doc.
No, you got it.
Well, I love all the monitors. Don't get me wrong. I love the minder units and I love all the equipment, but the plants are the boss. So if the plants are saying, hey, I want it more humid, use the minder as a guide, but make it more humid. If the plants are telling you something, listen to them. The minder is a robot. The plants are alive in there. You got to listen to the plants. So that's a good way to dial it. Use the minder as a guideline also. So if the plants are telling you something different, listen to them first, but use that minder as analysis. It's real data. It's something to go by. It's not a guess anymore. We have something to we can look at a screen and they're hectopascals. Is that the word you used?
Yes.
We've got a unit of measurement now that I never knew of before. So we've got those things. We can actually see them. But always trust the plants first. The plants are the boss.
Yeah, and some plants might be at a 3 VPD for the best yield it'll ever do instead of that 10 optimal VPD. So you can't really listen to that, It
just depends on where the plant is from. And people, I like it a little bit cooler. Most of the time, and I may get yelled at, a lot of ladies like it warmer. Girls get cold more quickly. So some people and different sexes, we all like different things. So it's like trying to keep different women happy in one room. You got to make the plants happy, and the monitor, all the gear may not be the right idea. It's awesome stuff, but pay attention to those plants.
There's a challenge I want.
It's too cold.
So just to sort of knock on from what Jeff was saying, it's devices can help you to learn what your plant wants, but ultimately, as Jeff said, that you want to respond to your plant. But if you haven't got that acquired knowledge yet, then the monitoring devices are going to help you see the relationship between what's happening with your plant and what's happening in the environment. But over time, you'll then start to have a feel for what the plant's actually showing you. But it can take obviously years and years of experience to gain and acquire that knowledge.
Yeah, I mean, it is an information tool. It's there to allow you to make a better decision. Doesn't make the decisions for you. It just gives you some extra information that allows you to make a better decision. I mean, my background from the financial market day to day is that every data provider has a little byline that says, this is information only. Any decision you make based on this information is your decision, not ours. We're not responsible if you make the wrong decision. But it is a case of the more information you have, the better decision you can make. And one of the nice things about something like the Minder is if you've got a problem with your grow space, you can go to your local grow store and you can actually call it up on your screen and go, look, I'm having a problem. And that, I think a lot of shops will go, well, probably the first question they ask is, well, what's your environment been like? And 90% of the people go, fine. And you go, okay, then you won't be asked.
Everything's perfect.
Yeah, no problem.
All day long.
And as a guy working in this, people working in the stores, and that you're never going to go into their grow room. So the next best thing is an insight into their room, and to be able to look at it and say, there you go, it's too hot, and you can't argue that it's too hot. So for stores, it allows you to do a quicker time to solve the problem. The store can go too hot, buy an AC unit or buy a.
It would save me so much time if I could see everybody's environment as they walk in.
They show you pictures of the plants and you can say the plants look like shit, but I can't tell what's happening in the room. I can't see the humidity. I can't see exactly. Yep. I just know the plants look miserable.
Yeah. And everybody says that their room's perfect. Yeah, it's this, it's that. But, they're using a cheap digital Max-Min thermometer. It's a 1 point. You don't know when that was. You don't know when they last reset. This is, And
then another thing that is also really important is the placement of the sensors. What you're interested in understanding is what is going on inside the canopy, not what's happening above the canopy or necessarily below the canopy, but what's going on inside the canopy. So putting your sensor, your environment monitoring sensor, a foot above the canopy, great. I know it's like a foot above the canopy, which is probably going to be hot and dry, which is what you'd expect it to be. Then you drop it inside the canopy and it's still hot, but the humidity just went through the roof. And now you realize I don't have any airflow in there. And this is what I was talking about earlier. That's what's so important. So put 90% of the canopy, or almost more than that, I would say probably about 98% of the canopy exists below that top 2 inches, and you want to be monitoring. That's the really important part that you want to be monitoring.
You're aiming for a homogeneous environment.
And the thing about understanding where the plants come from is also how much they can take, what they can do. You think about that again. Some of these strains, sativa strains, like higher temperatures, higher humidity, but they like a lot of air movement. There's a reason for that. It stops stuff settling on them. Otherwise, how is well, actually, this stage, early plant growth, high humidity, how do you maintain that? And using something like foggers, I have a little bit of a being my bonnet about using foggers. What are people's tips and tricks? Because you can only use a dome for so long, and then at some point the problem you run into is it's a magnifying glass, and it'll get too hot in there as well. You don't want to cook the plant. So at some point you have to take the lid off, but you're still trying to maintain a relatively high humidity panel. What are your tips and tricks for doing that?
I don't put a dome on the seedlings. Sorry, go ahead, Tyler.
Oh, I just generally run the humidifier and do the like general misting every like 6 hours or so. Just to try and keep those numbers in the right range.
Okay.
I don't like the dome on the ceilings. I feel like it makes them weak. I want to get those ceilings out of my environment, get them exposed to the fan so they can start getting beat up and get strong right away. So I don't put any domes on them. I keep my seedlings in the room with my mom plants and my veg plants, and that room gets quite humid. So basically, just kind of have a couple of pots in there that are always wet, and I think that keeps the humidity going. Having them right in that room keeps them happy with everybody else. I'm lucky enough to be able to dial in the rooms. I've got rooms I can, instead of using a dome or a small area, I just make the whole room the humidity and temperature that I need. So I'm lucky that way. Just equipment, the right equipment. Don't vent out that humidity. Keep it in there.
Yeah. I mean, the optimal would be to have like a lung room where you can get everything right before it moves in.
Wouldn't that be awesome? Yeah, it's expensive square footage.
Yeah,
the room that does nothing.
Yeah, I know. People that just fill it with plants. I've got a few extra. I'll just put them in there. Yeah. Where can I stick these? Yeah.
People don't understand the value of that space.
Yeah.
I actually covered my plants this time. I took and cut some juice bottles in half and covered them with those. But usually I don't ever cover my plants with domes or anything. I usually leave them exposed like Jeff does and just let them go. But I didn't have space to put them in my normal area. So kind of what I did is I did an initial wetting of the cocoa. And every other day I've been just kind of keeping it wet with like, a big stadium cup of water. I've just been keeping it wet with that, like some lush root from dragonfly, a little bit of microbes and stuff. But it's doing pretty good in there. But once I got the minder plugged in, it was extremely dry in there. My VPD was like 18, 19 when I plugged it in. So I decided to actually go with the domes.
And what would be interesting, what's interesting there, again, what might work part of this as an experiment is put domes on 2 of them and leave 2 without domes on and see if you can, does the lower VPD environment, which will be inside that dome with it being really humid all of a sudden, do you see a difference in the final plant? We can do side by side now. I mean, we can actually see, does it make a difference? You've got the environment. So maybe just leave 2 of them covered and 2 uncovered, see what happens.
Yeah, I'm not going to leave them on there for very long.
It doesn't need.
Ben Darrett, so you cut off this.
Sorry, I was just going to say that you don't even need to have a sealed dome. So if you're using, say, like cut-off bottles, take the top off and put some holes in there. It'll just help you to create a microclimate as well.
Yeah.
When I'm propagating seeds, we were talking about them shedding the shells, and sometimes I'll use domes up until they shed the shells in order just to keep that moisture there, and then remove the lid and harden them up as soon as possible generally. But obviously I have good rooms that I can keep the humidity high in, so it's but that's not the case for everybody. But yeah.
I mean, there are good those are handy little tricks. What you've got to watch out for when you're using the domes is that it doesn't cook the thing. It can get really hot in there. So you try to, over a small little seedling, the minimum would be like a 2-liter Coke bottle kind of thing is what I'm thinking of. You need quite a bit of space and do make holes in it so that there is airflow. The last thing you want to do is come back to a wilted cooked plant.
Mine, it's not sealed. It's just sitting. Actually, it doesn't even cover probably half the space of the top of the pot. So half the cocoa is exposed. But perfect. I mean, it doesn't even really gather any condensation a whole lot in there, just enough to hold a little bit of that moisture from the cocoa around the plant a little bit.
Yeah. And the thing about the foggers is they throw so much mist up into the air. And I think the trick with foggers is if you're going to use them, you need to have all of the moisture needs to be evaporated into the atmosphere. So almost if you run it through a long pipe, and by the time it gets to the end of the pipe, it's clear what's coming out the other end. There's no visible mist coming out the other end, and you actually have it run. And yet you've got to point the pipe slightly up, so anything that does condense runs back down the pipe. But then you just have moist humid air coming out the other end, and you're not going to run the risk of, well, you'll have a lot less calcium deposit forming on everything. You'll certainly get a lot less of that happening.
Yeah, I have customers who just put their foggers straight into the incoming air ducts. And so by the time it's dispersed into the room, you don't have that dense mist.
Yeah, you really want to avoid the dense mist moving around the room. And if you stick your hand right in front of one of those things, eventually you feel the condensation forming on your hand.
Oh,
You think,
straight
okay,
away.
that's what's going on all the leaves. But again, you think those leaves are 2 degrees, 3 degrees cooler. This really wet air suddenly goes over them. It just condenses on all of them. And for plants like this, where they have these buds, if it gets moist, it just wicks it straight into the middle of the bud.
And obviously, if you've got wet leaves, then that's going to knock back onto your VPD again. So what you're seeing is your VPD direct on the leaf. If you're coating that with moisture continuously, then that's going to have an effect on plant uptake and transpiration too.
Yeah.
That moisture will give you powdery mildew. It's a good start.
Yeah. And then, it's a slippery slope from there. Well, I tell you what, guys, we do usually try to keep these to about an hour or so. We've now been going a little bit longer than that, which is good. I think we've had some good chat. And I tell you what, it's been another good show. Thank you for everybody joining in. Next week, I think what we'll have is we'll start looking at the journals for the week, see how everybody's getting on, get some pictures and compare and contrast. See who has the biggest sprout.
Whoa.
Yeah.
I'm excited to see how my kids are doing.
Oh dear. No, great. And once again, I'd just like to say thank you to all the sponsors, which Jeff from RE Genetics, New Millennium, and 5/8. Ben Autopot showing up for Autopot there. Thank you very much. I'll be representing Peel Grow Systems. You can find us at Peel Grow Systems on Instagram. Peelgrow.systems is our website. I will say if you're in the US and you want to order one of our systems, go to webhydro.com. They've got stock and it's local postage then. So it's much quicker delivery time. Given everything that's going on at the moment, post to the US, etc., it's just a bit slow. So I would recommend going for that. For UK people who are looking to buy, actually, and anyone looking to wholesale, speak to Ben.
Sunflower horticulture.
Sunflower horticulture. I can remember sunflower, sunpower, one of the two. Sunflower horticulture for a local UK distributor. Jeff.
Find me. You can find my seeds at seedsherenow.com. Podcast on YouTube, the Grow From Your Heart podcast, and on Instagram, I use Irie_genetics is probably the best way to find me. Thanks again for having me. I cannot promise I'll be here next week, but I will keep you updated, and I will be here the week after that.
Fantastic. Yeah, no, it's not a requirement to be here every week.
And if people are interested in Autopot, then you can go to your local hydro store, both in the States and UK. And if you're tuning in from Canada, the website for USA is Autopot_USA. I think that's also for their Instagram as well. In the UK, you can again contact your local hydro store, or if you need to find out where that is, you can go to autopot_global.co.uk.
Excellent.
And does it, Jeff, do you have a link for New Millennium?
I think it's just New Millennium.
Yeah, I think they're New Millennium Nutrients or newmillennium.com. On Instagram, check Jaren58 or New Millennium Nutrients or 58 Distribution.
Okay, cool.
I think.
Hang on, let's see. Tyler's got something there. We'll see if we can get that too.
There we go.
Nutrients. Yeah.
Newmillenniumnutrients.com.
Yep.
Yep, there we go. Cool.
Awesome.
Shout out to Jaren. Good guy. Support those folks.
Excellent. All right. Well, and just a quick round for everybody else who's on Instagram. Tyler, you are.
Scooby-Doo.
Shrooby-Doo, at Shrooby-Doo on Instagram, at Lefty's Farm on Instagram, at Dr. Wiggler, and at Underground, who had to drop off because his phone died.
Yeah.
He's
And
just
then,
enjoying the
if
sunshine, like and shit.
If people want to hit me up on Instagram, that's Plantasia_shop. So yeah, check me out.
Cool.
And also PL.
At PL Growth Systems.
Yeah, lovely.
Fantastic. And Operation Grow 2019, because we started it in 2019. That's right. All right, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your